You're very welcome back to the Matchbook NFL podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by the trio of Judah, Drew, and Sam. And it was a pretty decent week on the podcast, Judah. But I will say, as bad beats go, that Texan -2.5. For those watching, I know Drew's watched it back twice. God love him. But that was a pretty bad beat. That has to be up there, hasn't it?
That's got to be among the worst ones there. It's also like you knew it was coming. Thankfully, we have live betting and we're able to at least get some of the hedge there. But when a kicker goes down like that, you just have all the sniffer was out that something funky was going to happen. This game was going to end in some weird way. Not to mention the fact that, like, I don't know, a 39-37 Texans-Bucks game is just like one percentile sort of outcome. Like, it was just one of those games you knew something funky was going to happen.
And Judah, you're putting in the hours watching NFL these days. You did 16 hours Sunday.
Look, you gotta love the grind, and I tell you what, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it was the scoregami, by the way.
True.
Never had a 39-37 game until that.
A little bit of solace, and not covering the 2.5.
Sam, a bit on what Judah said in terms of the amount of football, but also enjoying it because people look, particularly in the States, at the next 4 primetime games and be getting a lot of heat. Judah's sort of been tweeting going, we're going to be missing these are the good times, basically. We're going to miss, to paraphrase Judah, we're going to miss this in the summer, Sam. So I think it's about not slagging all the games off, just sit back and enjoy. And we're going to start with the Colts and Patriots, obviously.
Definitely. I think as well, it's like so many of these games that you see a primetime game, it doesn't look that appealing. And quite often they're actually a lot more fun than they look on paper. So, and often the games that you think are going to be good are pretty bad. And thankfully, the Cowboys-Eagles game wasn't like that this past weekend. But that was one of those I was a bit worried it might end up being a bit of a stinker out of nowhere. But what a Sunday of football. And we go again.
Yeah, we go again. And Drew, on the Cowboys at Eagles, because that was prime time for us in the Ireland and the UK. I felt like I was watching a playoff game. 8-9 weeks before we get to do that. So it was just almost a privilege watching that game, but it was really decent football, in fairness.
Yeah, I mean, it ended the way almost all Cowboys playoff games seem to end, which is they could have a chance to win and they bottle it in the end.
Multiple times.
Yeah, that's stung. In the moment, you're just like, God, there were so many chances. They didn't even get really a decent shot at the end zone, even when you have, to not really get a decent shot when you have 1st and 5 at the 6-yard line in like 24 seconds. You're like, okay, like a good coach gets 3 chances here, and Mark McCarthy basically got 0. And it's like, it's tough to swallow, but that's what happens when you go to war with Mike McCarthy. So lesson learned. And, it's even more than that though. Like I've come around and I've rewatched the game. And like my general takeaway was you got about a 95th percentile effort out of the Cowboys in that one. The defense didn't really matter all that much other than like keeping them in the game and, giving them opportunities to come back in the fourth quarter. And it was about a 65th percentile-ish for the Eagles. The Eagles they're playing on a different level because their philosophy and the degree to which they can execute on 4th down is just, it's a different game than everybody else is playing right now. And 95th percentile effort, it's not going to cut it if you're Dallas and you're on the road in that particular spot. And pretty amazing to see what the Eagles were able to pull off with not really having Jalen Hurts rushing as part of their arsenal. Didn't really matter. Just in general, replacement guard, rookie making his first started guard, didn't matter. Actually, that guy had one of the plays of the game sitting on the football on the DeAndre Swift fumble. But it was, I think it was pretty instructive that it doesn't really matter how well the Cowboys are playing on a given day. They're going to probably run into someone who is, going to find a way to just frustrate them in the end of game state. And I think that really throws a lot of cold water on their hopes to get to the Super Bowl. And, they're going to have to go through the Eagles again. And that particular outcome means it is highly likely if they play the Eagles in the playoffs, it's at the link, and best of luck to them.
Yeah. You feel that Eagles haven't even started yet, as you touched on, Drew, and they're still managing to beat the Cowboys in that one. So yeah, brilliant week 9. We're going to move on to week 10. The 4 games, incidentally, the Germany game, Colts at the Patriots, 49ers, Jaguars, Saints, Vikings, Lions at Chargers. A reminder, if you are watching on the YouTube stream, do hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds and gets our content out to a wider audience. Be much appreciated. If you're listening on the podcast, a 5-star review on your preferred platform is also appreciated. And do check out the Match with Bet and Exchange. Judah touched on live bets if you want to lay some of your stake off, particularly when you've got the Texans -2.5 and they don't have a kicker. The Match live in play markets are constantly there, keeping an eye particularly on the point spread and totals. So we will start in Germany and we will have a look at the Colts at the Patriots. 2:30 in the UK and Ireland. This is kicking off at the Colts are the favorites 183, Patriots 2.1, and the Patriots are getting a 1.5 head start here at 193. The total is 43, heavily favored towards the over. So Sam, I'll start with you on Bill Belichick and the Patriots, who under Tom Brady got quite big in Germany over the years. So they are expecting a monster Patriots crowd this weekend.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the crowd is kind of made up, because we saw this past week, it was just a sea of red, wasn't it? And those fans kind of really turning out. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think with obviously Belichick being on the hot seat, I just think it's going to add a whole nother dimension to this game. We've obviously, last week we had just various sort of cameras zoomed in on the Kraft family, trying to do a bit of lip reading. It's kind of reached that point, which is just, I think, really fun in a kind of perverse way. So yeah, really looking forward to it. It's going to be a really good game. Actually, is it going to be a good game? I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I think my best bet for this one probably goes against that, which is under 43.5 points.
It'll be a great occasion, Sam. Great occasion. Maybe not a
It'll be a great occasion. It'll be a great occasion, and I'm sure we'll enjoy it. But I mean, that Pats offense is absolutely anemic. They just can't get it going. The defense doesn't look as good as it has done previous years. I mean, the Commanders, they don't even look like they want to win games at the moment, but they still manage to do it relatively easily. And we haven't seen Gardner Minshew against Bill Belichick yet. And I think, first game against the old master is going to be a tough one. I think this is going to be just two teams cancelling each other out, to be honest with you. And yeah, I'm expecting a low scoring game, but an interesting one nonetheless, with potentially some huge ramifications for the Pats in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interested how that plays out over the season and maybe into next season as well. Judah, over to you. You're looking at the Colts and siding with them. Is this like every bet, I guess it's a bit of both, but is it an anti-Patriot sort of angle, or are you looking to get the Colts on side?
I think it's actually a little bit of both. On the Colts front, I think the market has been most wrong about the Colts offense. I mean, that's like descriptively true. They scored 50 more points if you take the team totals and then the realized totals. They scored 50 more points than the market has anticipated. I think they're still slow to kind of upgrade this offense, which, like, by the looks of it, shouldn't be that good. A Gardner Minshew offense with like a pretty good offensive line, and outside of Michael Pittman, not really too many wide receivers. This shouldn't be exactly a great unit, but the market has overlooked them. They're still slow to upgrade them. They're scoring points. They're kind of at a average clip. And I would say on the Patriots side, this is a disaster of the team. The offense is horrible. I think the Colts defense is as bad as it comes, but I don't think the Patriots can take advantage of that. Mac Jones hasn't been performing any better against bad defenses. It doesn't really matter. If you slice it up by any matchup factor, Mac Jones is struggling. This is not an offense that has succeeded. I don't see them as being able to take advantage of the Colts matchup. And at the end of the day, this Colts offense is average. And if I've got an average offense against a bottom 3, bottom 5 offense, and I'm not getting, if it's within a field goal, I'm going to take that, especially without any home field advantage here.
Yeah. Moving over to you, Drew, were you tempted at all with either of those angles, the total, the money line, the maybe taking the Colts here? Or I know it's ultimately a pass for you, but where was your thinking going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I was tempted with both, surely. I mean, I agree with Judah's take that the Colts offense still underrated by market. I want to hang that kind of mostly on like the Shane Steichen bringing some pretty awesome just ability to game plan to the table for this Colts team, because that the offensive line has played better this year. They're kind of continuing to integrate Jonathan Taylor into the plan. Michael Pittman is still at least a plus receiver, if not like he's not like top 20, I don't think, but he's definitely like decent. And Gardner Minshew is really, really a tough read. he has had some games where he has been a walking turnover. And he, having watched some of those, when I had like stakes in those games, I was like, wow, like this guy is going to self-immolate at some point, and it's just a matter of time. A younger version of me would have looked at this game against Belichick and be like, this is the time, here it comes. Like, Belichick's gonna have exactly the right. Now I don't think Belichick really has the horses on defense to really make anything special happen here. And I think, if there's a lot of because I don't really have a bet on this game, I think I'd rather use my time to just talk about the Patriots and Belichick a little bit, because this as Sam kind of mentioned, there's a lot swirling in the Boston media space about what the future of Belichick is, and like, I kind of don't buy any of that. I'll be honest with you. Like, there's really nothing else to say about the Patriots this year because they are that bad. But like, what is best served for this franchise is not firing Belichick. It's losing games this season. So they're kind of doing what's in their best interest. They had an impossibly tough schedule this year. They got early with a bunch of injuries. Mac Jones, if you believe anything that was talked about in the offseason, was not really ever part of their long-term plan after the way things went down between the organization and the player last year. So I think realistically, the Patriots, even if they got to their kind of better than average rating, as they typically do under Belichick over the balance of a season, is still a team that is not necessarily served by winning games this year. And I don't know that ultimately this doesn't end in a divorce this year between Kraft and Belichick, but Belichick is an asset. Like, he's not getting fired. Like, the other kind of part of the story was like, because the Commanders were in Foxborough last week, and I'm sure that stirred up some of this in particular, but there's an affinity for the Commanders owner for Belichick, and there may be a deal to be had if Kraft really want to separate, go their separate ways, but I'm not 100% sure that's what they want. And the Patriots are pretty clearly in a point where they need to rebuild. What has kind of befallen this franchise the most significantly since their championship contending days is obviously they haven't been able to replace production at the quarterback position, but even more than that, Belichick's decision making across the roster, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, has been hugely questionable. The GM Belichick has been bailed out by Coach Belichick going on 10 years. I honestly don't remember the last time I've seen a Belichick draft class after 3 years and been like, wow, boy, did he nail it that year. Like, he is really, really having a tough time in just evaluating college level players and how they'll fit into his system. And if you really want me to kind of boil down what I think was Belichick's most sincere advantage, I think he used to have one of the best defenses in the NFL, particularly over the second half of seasons, because he was very, very good at evaluating team tendencies, coach tendencies, player tendencies, and integrating specific game plans to make it tough for you to execute in the way you wanted to do. The more film you had, the harder it was for you to succeed against Belichick. That was if you had a couple of successful games as a young player, he knew exactly what you were going to go to, and that's why he was so successful at just completely sticking his finger in the eye of young quarterbacks and young coaches. So I think the fact that the game has evolved, defense in particular has evolved into now it's much more scheme based than it is really being able to take away tendencies. That's kind of taken away a little bit of his fastball, a little bit of his advantage. And it's taken away his advantage in this game because Gardner Minshew's a little manic. Sometimes he's very, very chill and kind of working within structure and kind of doing things in a way that is kind of letting some of the other parts of the team really kind of do their parts and succeed. And on other times he's operating out of structure and he's trying to be a hero, and that kind of where he's his worst. So if he's a little bit contained in this game, and if the Colts are able to continue to build what we've seen so far under Shane Steichen, then I think they probably get the win. I think 2.5 is a perfectly fair line. I think the total at 43.5, I make it a hair higher, but betting over with this Patriots team when they leave as many points on the field as they were. Like, he had some just Belichick miserable decisions in game about when to go for it, when to punt against the Commanders. And he's absolutely lost his fastball in that regard. Like, just really no concept of kind of picking up the the 5% win probability here and there in game. So I think ultimately the Colts probably win this one. They probably win by a small margin, but I don't disagree much with looking for an under or looking for a Colts bet here.
Okay, fascinating on Bill Belichick. Sam, briefly, I want to bring you in. Just I know you cover soccer as well, and you see the Premier League sack race. They have departed with Bill Belichick, but obviously the draft and everything else in NFL makes it very hard to make that call. I don't know, are you withdrew in that, and that they'll probably hang on to the end of the season, or maybe keep this partnership going for the time being?
I think they have to wait to the end of the season at the very earliest, if at all, at least this year, because I just look at him and, like Drew said, I still think while there are questions to be asked, he is still very much an asset to that organization. And I think when you're looking at people in that building, whether that's coaches, whether that's players, he's still the one that I think would get the most interest from other franchises. So I think they'd be very stupid to get rid of him. We've seen what he's done in the past, and admittedly, that is getting further and further ago with each passing year. But there's still a very, very talented head coach in there, and I think they'd be best served by at least giving him one more season.
Okay, that is fascinating. We probably won't get a chance to talk about Bill Belichick again and the Patriots' future. Judah, anything to add on Bill Belichick very briefly, because there's a chance we may not cover a Patriots game before the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think he
Hopefully
signed he signs a massive contract extension before the season. I'd be very surprised to see him let go. But I think he'll dictate his own terms, whether he wants a new shot, whether he thinks it's right. But he's not getting fired, I don't think.
Yeah, fascinating how that plays out over the next few months. Very Arsene Wenger and Arsenal for those weekend football listeners on the podcast. Check that out Thursday morning, of course. We will move on to 49ers Jaguars. Incidentally, the two bets there: Colts -2.5 for Judah and under 43.5 for Sam. 49ers at the Jaguars. Take a look at the betting. The Niners 1.62, Drew's Jags 2.48 here on the money line. Point spread sees the Jags get a 3-point head start, and the total for this currently on Matchbook is available at 45.5. So Judah, set this game up for us. It's ultimately a no bet for you, but where's your sort of thinking here? And it's a big game for both teams.
Yeah, certainly a big game. I think kind of the way I'm viewing each of these teams is a little more uncertain, I think, at this point in the season than the rest of the league. I think the Jaguars, there are a lot of reasons, we've been talking about this a lot, to kind of buy the tail. Like, we haven't actually seen the best of them yet. But there's also, part of me, which is like, it's been, 9 weeks, 8-9 weeks of Jaguars games, and they haven't actually put it all together yet. Like, maybe is the 2022 the kind of fluke here, or is that a sign of what's to come in 2023? And I'm not exactly sure kind of where I stand there. I think the Niners, it's really until they're healthy, fully healthy, and Trent Williams is still not practicing. I think this is kind of a questionable unit to be pricing as highly as the market is right now. Right, 4.5 points against even a Jaguars, fundamental team from 2023 is still a lot. Right, we we have a very small sample, and it's kind of the same point I made a couple weeks ago, of what Brock Purdy and the San Francisco offense is like without the full complement of weapons. When they're all fully healthy, agreed, this is an awesome team. But the market's still kind of hanging on to that and not pricing, well, how much do we really know about the Niners without all their guys? All that is to say, it's kind of leaving me off this game because there's a lot of uncertainty. I think I want to be picking more spots where I think I know a little bit more, or at least have more confidence that the market might be mispricing this by a little bit. But it surely will be a fascinating game among two of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, true. These are your Jaguars. When you were going through your schedules at the start of the season before making the outright bets, I'm guessing you were giving this to the Niners in your head. And where are you at now in terms of, if you had to have a bet here, is it the total? Is it the side?
Yeah, this is, in the season long kind of calculus for buying into Jags, this was not really a factor. At a conference game, I kind of had like the Chiefs game, the Bills game, and then a couple other kind of the high profile AFC contenders. Like, if they're winning those head to heads, then you could steal the 1 seed. That was basically the whole handicap. This one is a little bit gravy. And yeah, I think the Niners are clearly the better team. And I guess I get where Jude is coming from, where the Jags are a little bit of a like, who are they exactly? Because the results we've got on paper and the EPA per play data we've got on the Jags so far is like kind of a weird misfit with their preseason priors, right? Like this defense is overperforming aggressively, and the offense is starting to maybe regress to the preseason prior we expected, considering how much talent they have and how, you know, anyone with the, you know, kind of a fair assessment of the, you know, the incoming talent of Trevor Lawrence would have for the quarterback position here. So I think we're kind of at a position where right now should probably be a sell high spot on Jags D and a buy low on Jags offense, if there's anything to be bought at all on the Jaguars. You marry that with the fact that the Niners are coming in with one of the best offenses in the NFL, if not the best. And I think this sets up pretty perfectly for an over at 46.5. The Jags, it's worth noting, even in some of their impressive wins so far this season, and they're streaking, by the way. I don't know if you guys know this, but they got the longest win streak against the spread going in the NFL right now. They somehow have covered 5 games in a row, and even in those 5 covers, they were very, very willing to let teams score points late in these games. They play some of the kind of softest prevent D. So if the Jags come out and they're playing at home, they're playing well, and the offense is clicking and they're scoring points, am I nervous that the Niners aren't going to be able to come back and score? No, not at all. Like, this is probably going to fly over 46 if it's a Jags with a, you know, with a lead. And if the Niners come out and they put it together a clean performance and they're playing from ahead, I doubt they would take their foot off the gas here and play keep away. So I really just see opportunities here for both teams to be scoring independent of game state. And this kind of stands out as like let's sell high here a little bit on this Jaguars defense that can't really rush the passer, that has been doing well in coverage, but is now going to have to reintegrate, you know, a guy coming off injury and Tyson Campbell. And so I you know, it's a different type of offense. It's a huge step up in class from the teams they've been playing so far this year. You know, Jags defense has gotten away at playing against some pretty, lackluster quarterback play outside of the Bills, where, you know, they sleptwalked through the first half. So I would expect that this is more of a track meet than the market makes. And I think anything under 47 is a bet to the over.
Drew, can I ask a question about the Jaguars? I think you bring up a really interesting point with the kind of off season. Maybe I'm just projecting my view. I saw it as we look at 2022. We see the second half of the season. Trevor Lawrence is, top 5 in any metric you want to choose, and the Jaguars are kind of leaning into that, and they're passing way over expected. And it's like, okay, this is the next Bengals, Bills, Chiefs, that kind of dynamic. The quarterback and the coach who's allowing that quarterback to pass all the time. And I'm looking at this season, and not even it's like, okay, Lawrence hasn't played that well, but also like they started the season kind of with this game plan of like, okay, we're going to pass over expected 5, 6, 70% of the time. And now it's like actually kind of a run first, like let's not make mistakes team. Does that at all concern you? Like looking at the Jags offensive upside?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of people talk about this and they're right. Like what the coaching staff is doing tells you how they feel about their own internal evaluation of the team. And this team coming off of bye and evaluating the first half of their season, if that continues to be their, the way they want to point, I think that is telling you something pretty spooky about the way that their internal evaluations are reading Trevor Lawrence's progression. And, I don't know that you challenge your rating on Lawrence and all of a sudden move him from, 8 to 16 in your quarterback ratings, especially because the rest of the quarterbacks in the NFL everybody is kind of fallen off a cliff this year. Like you look at week 9 total EPA leader this year versus last year, and it's like, what happened? Like there has just been no standout performances. So Lawrence is still probably, even if you move him down in terms of expectation, he's still kind of landing in that end of that top 10 regardless. And then I give Doug Peterson a lot of credit. And I think one of the things he has kind of shown in successful campaigns with his teams is evolution, right? You don't want to look the same in week 16 as you looked in week 2. If you do, you are absolutely cooked. If you are just out there throwing heat every single week and it's just like 94-mile-an-hour fastballs, you're going to get caught up to and you're going to get smashed. And I think he probably is trying different things week in, week out. He is a very, very good guy at kind of coming up with game specific game plans that that are tendency breakers, that are kind of pointed at opponent weaknesses. And so if they come out in this game against the Niners and it's a lot of what we saw against the Steelers, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. And I think that actually tells us more about what they think they have than it does, kind of give us a buy sign on this offense. But that said, I think the Niners defense is a little overrated. I know they made investments here at pass rush. I'm not sure that was their issue. It's a weak secondary. And if you can, if you can hold off the pass rush for just long enough, then you should be able to move it on these guys. And I guess that's the important battle to watch in this one for the Jaguars, scoring into the 20s, which is is Bosa and Chase Young, are they getting home? And the speed at which Lawrence is processing and getting the ball out of his hands has me optimistic that they're going to be able to overcome that.
Okay, fascinating on the Jags and their style of play potentially evolving back towards that pass as the weeks go on. Sam, a little bit on the 49ers. I was listening to a sort of an Irish-American journalist who works over in San Francisco after they went 5-0, and he was talking about the city and how excited the city was to finally have a football team. This could be the Super Bowl, the return of the great times, and it was unfortunate timing to have him on for that section because they've gone 3 defeats in a row. Where are you at with the 49ers in terms of now 5-3 currently? It's a big game for them in terms of getting back on track here after the bye.
Yeah, I think those times can still come back. I still think they're the best team in the conference, if I'm honest with you, even after those results. But I mean, I think you have to take into account the kind of the injuries and Brock Purdy. Whilst he was cleared, he came back. Let's be honest, he wasn't 100%. There was some sort of lingering effect from that concussion, I think, because he just didn't look the same guy we saw earlier in the season. But I think just the quality of personnel they have across the field is very telling. Obviously, they've acquired Chase Young now, and whilst it's obviously not necessarily the player they needed, I think just adding another sort of dynamic threat to that pass rush that's going to be giving Trevor Lawrence nightmares, I think. And whilst I'm personally hopeful of a Jags win, I just think 49ers -3 seems like the way to go here. We've obviously had three defeats in a row. Double-digit loss to the Bengals not last week, 2 weeks ago. They're coming in off that bye, and there probably wasn't a team in the NFL that needed a bye any more than the Niners that time. They got Brock Purdy, he's back fit. Deebo Samuel, he's been practicing, so he's almost certainly going to play. And it seems like Trent Williams is leaning towards playing from everything I've read, and I think that's obviously a huge boost for the team. And I kind of, when I was sort of pricing up in my mind how I'd go about this game, I was thinking more about the kind of players who are returning. If you'd have told me I could have got 49ers -3 in week 5, what would I have done? I'd have smashed my money on the deck straight away. So for me, it's very much a kind of investment in, I think, what the team was a couple of weeks ago or a month and a half ago. And I'm kind of really, I guess, laying it on that. And I'm still, like Judah mentioned, I'm not 100% sure about the Jags at the moment. They can kind of flip between some incredible stuff and some pretty middling football at times. So I just feel like the 49ers -3 it's got to be the smartest play for me anyway this week.
Yeah, it's probably the game of the early window. 49ers at the Jaguars. We've got over 46.5 for Drew, apologies, and Sam. 49ers laying the points at -3.0. We will go to Saints at Vikings here. This is 9:25 in the UK. And take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. We've got the Saints on the money line, 173. The Dobbs and the Vikings, 228. The point spread sees the Vikings get a 2.5 head start here. And the total is 41.5. So, look, Drew, I know you're ultimately a pass in this game, but let's talk a little bit about Dobbs and the Vikings. I mean, it seems every week we see something insane, but I think Dobbs leading the Vikings to victory, just given that he didn't even know some of his players' teammates' names going into the game, I think was as remarkable as you're going to get in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, you give Dobbs the flowers, no doubt, but I think the major takeaway was that was sort of the most impressive in-game coaching performance we've seen in years by Kevin O'Connell. Very, very easy to see that in the first couple of series by Dobbs, he had no clue what was going on, and O'Connell, I think, made a really, really wise adjustment on how to pivot his approach for communication so that they didn't get stuck in mud there. And the Vikings coming away with the win. Some wild out of structure stuff from Dobbs that made it happen, but really just extremely impressive, because if you step back, that was probably a play-in game for the 7th seed. If we're being honest, like somebody's got to be the 7th team in the playoffs. It was probably going to be the Vikings or the Falcons, and now the Vikings have the head-to-head win. And I think actually the Vikings have kind of opened the door to steal the NFC North if the Lions stumble at all here in the middle part of the season. So Vikings are interesting because they're doing it without some of their best players. Their three most important players clearly on the roster were Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Christian Darrisaw. In my opinion, none of those 3 guys suited up against the Falcons, so even more insane that they were able to pull it off. And I would guess as Darrisaw, I don't have a read on his injury at all. His absence completely surprised me last week, so I don't really know what's going on there. Justin Jefferson still is on the sidelines as well here, and I think there is a realistic chance that there may be some a little bit of excitement about last week kind of built into this number. I make it 3 personally, and but that said, like I am having a little bit of a crisis of confidence in what Dennis Allen and the Saints are doing here. The Bears unraveled aggressively in the second half of that game, and yet it was still kind of in the balance for a lot of the fourth quarter there, and I don't really understand why. Ultimately, they didn't have the ball chance to.
Drew, how did they not cover? How did they not cover? And it was 5-0 on turnover. I think it's ridiculous.
They missed a field goal, and they ended the game with the ball in their possession at the 10-yard line or 2-yard. Was it the 2-yard line? So yeah, I mean that's how. But oh yeah, and they also made Tyson Bagent look like peak Michael Vick in the first half of that game, so that didn't hurt either. I'm like, Saints defense took the Bears very lightly until halftime of that game. Don't make no mistake. But that said, like, there are still some really, really tough things to try to wrap your head around with the Saints and their offense. And, I got excited seeing some of the highs in the comeback against the Jags, seeing some of the, some of the impressive nature that they brought out the following week. Like I was starting to believe that the Saints could put together a stretch of really impressive football and get better here. And, kind of with how easy their schedule is, sprint to like a, 13-4 kind of a record. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility. It's still not. Like the only good quarterback they play left is, the only good quarterback they play left is Jared Goff. And, everybody else on this schedule is like, well below, negative Z-score territory here. So it's the Saints should keep winning games. They probably win this game by 3. I don't know if you guys have fond memories of Saints Vikings games, but I can't really remember any of them that had really fun, interesting things that happened at all. So this is probably a one you can skip. But no, I think this should be a fun game. I think the Saints probably win. I think there'll be some excitement here, but I'll be damned if I can find an angle in the betting market.
No, it's one of my all-time favorite games. That one you're referring to, I think, Drew. Sam, we will go. You're leaning Saints here on the handicap. A little bit on what Drew said, like the Bears game, just taking that in isolation. Don't know how they didn't cover there, considering a lot of things went right. They gave Bears such a big lead. Were you like getting? Did they go up in your estimation after that game, even in victory, or did they go down a little bit?
I'd say in many ways, kind of both. I think the defense went down, the offense went up, and I'd say probably for the last couple of weeks, I felt like that. This maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, this offense has started to look a lot more capable, and I think that's the reason why I'd lean towards the Saints here. I think ultimately they're a team that look like they're improving on offense. The Vikings, I really don't know. I said a few weeks ago I didn't really know what they were, and that was with Kirk Cousins and with Joshua Dobbs. I certainly don't know what they are. He was outstanding when he came onto the field at the weekend, but I feel like that kind of hero ball isn't going to last. It's not really a coherent strategy to winning long term. So I don't know. He scares me, which is why it's a lean. Although the more I think about it, the more I actually am quite. Yeah, I'm going to take away the lean. I'm all in on Saints.
Delete it.
Yeah, I'm working my way around. But yeah, ultimately, I just think the offense is superior, and the defense is superior as well, even after a poor game against the Bears.
Yeah, Judah, it seems every week we're talking about the Saints and their schedule, but look, as Drew alluded to there, it is as easy as it probably is in the NFL the next few weeks. But it also gives the Saints the opportunity to build confidence. The Bears game, a prime example, didn't have their A game and still managed to get the victory, albeit they obviously didn't cover for us who backed the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be one of the easier ones. One of the harder ones.
True.
Actually, Minnesota for Cousins. I agree with a lot of Drew's points. I think that the fact that it was the most impressive coaching performance, and Sam was alluding to this also, that's not a sustainable strategy. Yes, Kevin O'Connell can be a good coach, but you kind of can't rely on this every week. I've got a couple of points here. Honestly, I'm very surprised Drew didn't make this. There's a massive health disparity right now between the Saints, which are effectively fully healthy, and the Vikings, who I don't know if Christian Darrisaw's playing this week. But even still, KJ Osborne's going to be in the concussion protocol. He's the Vikings are, if you look up and down the roster, obviously Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson are extremely, extremely hurt, and the Saints are not. But I think a lot of what this comes down to is the Saints are a massive step up in class, I think, from the Falcons. And this is a team that I don't think the market has downgraded enough with Josh Dobbs. Yes, Kevin O'Connell's a great coach, but this might be one of the worst rosters in football as currently constructed. I think that the Saints are far better. And if you want to look to the matchup here, Derek Carr has some of the most drastic splits if you want to look at whether he's under pressure or not. The Vikings are the fifth worst team at generating pressure despite blitzing 60% of the time. It's also not as if Derek Carr is a pumpkin against the blitz. He's perfectly average. I see this as exactly the sort of spot where the Saints can have success. And at the end of the day, same kind of logic as the Colts and Patriots. I think we're getting a far superior quarterback, and it's certainly inside a far superior team that's a lot healthier inside of the field goal. That's something I would really, really like to jump on. You're not going to get hero ball from Josh Dobbs. Let's just set the expectations here. In Josh Dobbs' best game, he's performing at the 20th best quarterback, and his base rate is 30th to 32nd. Add in the fact that the Saints have the far better roster, the matchup advantages, I would say Derek Carr is somewhere in the middle of that pack, and that's a huge, huge difference. And I'm going to be trying to capitalize on that.
Okay, both Sam and Judah looking at the Saints here in confident form there as well. So we'll lock that in. We will go to lines at the Chargers. Finally got my Chargers back in prime time on the Matchbook podcast in our four marquee games. The Lions are favorites here in LA, 173. The Chargers 226. The spread sees Chargers get a 2.5 head start, and the total is 48.5. Sam, you're basically hard avoiding this game in terms of a betting point of view, but the Chargers are back, aren't they? Two massive wins against really, really good quarterbacks. It's a great time to be alive.
I mean, yeah, I had a full disclosure. I had Justin Herbert in my fantasy team. I went to bed thinking I just needed a few points from him. Woke up, I saw 136 passing yards.
Shocking.
I was not happy. On the plus side, I had the Chargers defense, who for once
27 points
actually turned up. So they are the most perplexing team in the league. They can hang with anybody, or they can just. I just don't understand what they are. And for me, I have to avoid them here because, they've had a short week. Pretty bad, I thought, on the whole against the Jets, and the Lions. I just don't. I'm still a bit unsure on the Lions. I think I got a bit burnt after the Ravens game, and this for me is a watching brief, and hopefully learn a bit more about what these teams actually are. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I find it very, very hard to kind of really put my finger on either of these two teams on a weekly basis.
Yeah, Judah, a little bit to you on that. And look, in other sports, sometimes, particularly thinking of soccer, for example, if you dig out a result away from home in a tough away ground, it's all positive in that sense. But because NFL, and it's the obvious thing to say, offenses and defenses is completely split in separate games, the Chargers got nothing going on offense, essentially, even though despite the scoreline. So there is worry there despite a massive victory, which I don't think happens in other sports. So it's tough to sort of decide where you're at, I guess, with a team like the Chargers after that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of exactly my angle. And we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that Justin Herbert has not been as good this year. There's, if you look at the underlying data, if you look at basically anything, it will point to the same picture. And I think that's kind of He's coasting a little bit on reputation right now, which is certainly not something I expected. I will also say that the Lions defense, I think, has really benefited from kind of playing a bunch of bottom tier quarterbacks and has been absolutely exposed in games against good ones. That it's like, if Justin Herbert like turns it back, and like, would I be shocked by that? No, of course not. Like, I would kind of be a little bit concerned here. But I think I'm ultimately with Sam here. These are a bunch of teams I don't know much about. I think the Chargers defense has improved a lot in recent weeks, especially defending the run. Like, finally, we're having a state team which can defend the run. Like, will that have second order effects? Maybe. I think the Lions, I'm not really scared. I think the Lions are a good team. I just don't know which Justin Herbert we're going to get. Is this the kind of matchup that's going to wake him up? I'm not betting against Herbert, and I'm not betting for him either.
Okay, yeah, Drew, over to you. And I guess Steady can count himself lucky in the sense that we're not talking about the job being under threat anymore because of the schedule and getting those easy wins against the Bears and the Jets. Looking into this game, you do like a bet in this one.
Yeah, and it's a light card for me this week in general. Like, this slate was tough to crack, I gotta be honest. But I think the Lions are a bet at 2.5, and it's mostly just a bet on health. The Lions coming out of their bye week are fully healthy on offense. I think that matters. Chargers have done a nice job of stopping the run this year, but boy, oh boy, have there been opportunities to hurt these guys down the field. And I think Ben Johnson, with 2 weeks to do a little bit of self-evaluation of who you have on the Lions and knowing that you're at full strength going in and up against this defense, I think you're going to be able to find some pretty successful ways to really hurt them through the air. And then on the flip side, you have a Chargers team that I think is fatally flawed in a couple of ways. They certainly don't seem to be utilizing their personnel in the most optimal ways, on top of the fact that the absences of Mike Williams and Palmer, and again, I'm not 100% sure if Palmer is going to be available. I'm assuming he's not, but the absence, and again, like, just saying this out loud, you felt the absence of Palmer in the Monday Night Football game. Like, the fact that they had no one who was a downfield, being a threat, a guy that can create separation, was a huge problem. And I think the fact that you basically have a little bit of a one-note offense here with, short stuff over the middle to Keenan Allen makes this, Chargers, puts a lid a little bit on this Chargers offense overall. And the Lions defense, I don't think, is very good. I think they're overrated by market. I think their numbers are reflecting a pretty easy schedule to this point in the season, and they could get exposed in this game. Herbert could have a breakout game. All of that is very possible. But I look at just some of the flaws in their skill position personnel and the way this team was constructed. And I think, you're going to have a tough time in comeback mode if the Lions are playing a sharp game here. And honestly, like, if you want to know how I would rate the Chargers, I don't really see a ton of like separation between Chargers and Raiders. Like, there's not a huge gap, a huge delta between those two teams right now, even though one of them has a top 6 quarterback and the other has AOC. Like, overall, just the teams, because of the way they're constructed, aren't really hugely separated. And the fact that the Lions, handled the Raiders so comfortably in terms of some personnel matchups, I think is, particularly their offense against Raiders defense, is notable here. So I would expect the Lions to have a pretty successful day offensively, and I just don't see a ton of upside here for the Chargers, either holding a lead or being able to come back in a game if the Lions are playing well. So small bet for me, but I think Lions 2.5 is the angle, and I think didn't even say it out loud, but like, there's a coaching mismatch here, and it's in favor of the Lions, and I think it might be pretty substantial.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue with that last point. And we're locking in the Lions -2.5 for Drew, 193. And just a recap of the other games we covered: the Niners at the Jags. Drew's going for the overs. Sam is backing the Niners -3.0. Colts at the Patriots. Sam's going for the under. Judah's Colts -2.5. In the game we talked prior, Saints at the Vikings. Both Sam and Judah confident Saints can cover their insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the bets put up on the podcast, both now and coming up in our other sections. And as we touched on earlier, to hit that like button if you're watching on the YouTube stream, be much appreciated. We will go to any other bet section. Sam, prime time. 2 things here. Firstly, prime time games. Thought we were trying to avoid them as best we could. And secondly, we're taking on a massive handicap here. So talk us through your thinking.
Yeah, so I'm going for the Cowboys -16 against the Giants, and so -15.5. And I'll be honest with you, This is the biggest spread I've ever taken. I've ever put money on myself, and I don't feel particularly good about it. But this Giants team are diabolical. Tommy DeVito was horrific on Sunday. Genuinely awful. I mean, thank God we had that Eagles game to kind of get into whilst this horror show was going on. I've seen, since we've been recording, the Giants have, as expected, called Matt Barkley up to the active 53-man roster. So, and it seems from what Schefter was saying yesterday, there's a chance we might see him start. But whoever it is under center for the Giants, this is going to be an absolute mauling to the Cowboys. Cowboys put up the third highest amount of points per game on average in the league. That's 27.5 points per game. On the flip side of that, the Giants are right at the bottom of that table with 11.3 points per game. They are not a good team. They're decimated at the quarterback position. And I think ultimately here, as much as I don't want to take a spread quite as big as 15.5, I have to do it. I'm going to be all over the team total for Dallas, which I think is 27.5 right now. I think they beat that quite easily. And I even think there's a slight possibility we see the Cowboys defense outscore the Giants offense as well. So I think this is going to be an absolute bloodbath, and I can't wait to see every second of it and all the facial expressions on everybody in the stadium and on the Giants sidelines.
It'll be they are flat track bullies in fairness to you, Sam. So we'll lock in Cowboys minus 15.5 for Sam. Currently available 194 on match, but I just can't bring myself to do those big handicaps because you go 7-0 down. I'm like, oh no, we have a lot to cover. But best of luck to you, Sam. Judah, you have one selection here. You're looking at a money line play. The Titans at the Bucks. So this is essentially a pick'em game, even money on the Titans.
Yeah, I have to say I'm excited for Drew to hang the Giants money line in his long shot bet to will that into existence. But yeah, I'm gonna be taking the Titans here. I think it's obviously a small sample, but looking at the traits of Will Levis and the types of situations in which he's going to succeed, I think based on looking at passes through quarterbacks are going to be when his pockets are clean. And especially when he's going to be able to attack a defense vertically. And I think this is the perfect spot against a Bucs team, which is, the bottom 5 in the league at generating pressure and allowing explosive plays. I think this sets up perfectly for the type of game in which he'll succeed. I think we saw the Bucs probably 95th percentile offense game last week. I do not expect that, obviously, to continue. I think we just have a massive matchup advantage, and the market doesn't really know how to price Levis. And I think this is exactly the spot where we can project him to be, at the very least, the floor of 20th to 25th best quarterback with upside for a lot more. And perhaps I'd even be interested in some, Titans on the alt lines, really just kind of taking it to the Bucs vertically, like the Texans did with Stroud last week.
Okay, the only surprise, Judah, is you didn't put up the alt lines in this section.
Yeah, why aren't we laying 2.5?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a money line for you.
That's fair. That's fair. I actually think this is an interesting point. I would just say, I think that's kind of my main angle, but I also see, and the reason why I went with the game script is 25% of the time where it's like, okay, Levis isn't actually that good. And they can still kind of win this ugly game. So to capture both sides of that variance, I think is why I went with money line.
Plus, the Titans have had very, very good luck with kicker health so far this year. So they're due for a kicker injury, which could put a little of that juju on a 2.5. So, yeah.
There's always logic with you, Judah. Fair play. Drew, Seahawks. Again, I touched on other sports here, but I do reiterate, I don't know if there's a sport like it where you can bounce back so differently from a week. But it'll be tough for the Seahawks, I guess, to recover from that battering last week.
Yeah, and it will be, but I think this is kind of the right opponent to do that. I laid 6 with the Seahawks here, expecting that there are a couple of pretty clear matchup advantages. The last 2 weeks, the Seahawks have played the Browns and the Ravens, 2 very well coordinated defenses, 2 defenses with some pretty outstanding talent, particularly in the back end. And I think the I guess I shouldn't really say that. The Browns aren't like especially talented in the back end, but they have, they have a number of ways that they can scheme to kind of bring out the worst in Geno Smith, particularly by playing man coverage. Commanders can't really pull that off, and I think ultimately this is a game where people are like, oh yeah, Geno's not as bad as I thought he was after just seeing him play two amazing defenses back-to-back weeks. And there is some weakness here with the Seahawks in terms of their offensive line health. I completely get that, but with the Commanders now kind of rotating some of their key players to other teams on the defensive line, I think that's abated a bit. And I think the Seahawks defense showed us in week 3 against the Giants, when you're up against a team that, has a quarterback that is, kind of preternaturally interested in giving up sacks. You turn up the pressure a little bit, and you really kind of bring it from some unique parts of the field, surprise them, and you can really create some chaotic negative plays. So I think Seahawks defense is a blitz heavy here, and brings out the worst in Sam Howell. I could see 5 or 6 sacks on the card here for the Seahawks defense, maybe a turnover or 2. The Commanders offense and Sam Howell in general are being a little bit underrated by market, but I think this is not a great matchup for them against the Seahawks team, and what they, how they're potentially best attacked. So Seahawks for me, I think get an ugly, win an ugly game, something like 24-3 here with a healthy amount of sacks.
Okay, Seahawks minus 6.0, currently 195 against the Commanders. We'll go to our best Week 10 long shots. We'll look at the best long shots records going on the under the screen there. Apologies. Drew, 6-1. You will be up almost £300 if you bet £20 each week on the Matchup Betting Exchange, 2% commission. It's important to note in the UK, you will invariably get best price in the Matchup Betting Exchange, so do check that out. Really will help your P&L, but I think it doesn't really matter who you bet with, Drew, if you're going 6-1. The Giants are 11.5 on the money line, but I'm only messing Stan. That's not where you're going, Drew. So take it away with your best long shot picks.
Yeah, I mean, Sam missed the key part of that handicap, is that it's Matt Barkley time, baby. I don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be for the Giants, and it doesn't matter. The best long shot I think on the board this week is going to be the Denver Broncos. Back to the well here with the Broncos against the Buffalo Bills. They're on the road. They're 7.5-point dogs. Money line is 4.1. The Broncos offense is not great. I will completely admit that. But this, kind of market continuing to very slowly react to how decimated the Bills defense is, I think is worth paying attention to here. On top of that, the Bills offense is now relatively one-dimensional. They can really only get it done in the passing game, and they're going up against a full-strength Broncos defense here that I think can, be fairly effective against the likes of Diggs and company. So this sets up well, I think, for the Broncos defense to keep them in this game. You need a little bit of positive variance to get a money line home at 4.1. I definitely like plus 7.5, and I have bet that as well. But Broncos, I think, can steal one here. And, I don't really have any good answers for how the Bills fix things in a lot of ways. Josh Allen looks pretty hurt to me. They don't have much going on in terms of guys who can make plays outside of Stephon Diggs all of a sudden. And the Bills defense, I think, is at least playing like a bottom 5 unit. So Broncos could score some points here in surprise. And just worth noting, like the Broncos running game has been increasingly part of their approach. I think that actually matches up fairly well with the Bills right now. And it might be tough for the Bills to get, a clean stop in this one. And if they're in comeback mode, it might be tough for them to get a clean stop. This is a tougher rushing attack for the Broncos and what they're bringing in than what they just saw with the Bengals, and you saw how that played out. So I think the Bills might be in a spot of bother here, and there may be a buy low at some point with the Bills, but as 7.5-point favorites, considering all of the injuries they've sustained to this point in the season, I don't think it's this week.
Yeah, that is Monday Night Football. Broncos 4.1 currently. I mistake the Giants and Cowboys. They aren't in prime time. They're in prime time UK time, but not in America. Just wanted to point that out. Sam, Titans minus 2.5. You're agreeing with Judah, but you're going alternative handicap here in the long shot.
Yeah, so I'll kind of guide you through my thought process here. Is I was looking at a long shot, so I wanted to go for a team that was an underdog, but within a field goal. And then I wanted to bet the other way, so with a slight kind of handicap. 5 teams to go through. We've spoke about a couple of them already. Chargers, I said before, don't trust them. Patriots, I'd rather attack the total there. Cardinals, I don't want to get involved in anything involving Arthur Smith, frankly, which left either, and the Vikings we discussed as well, which left either the Raiders or the Titans. So for me, I've gone for the Titans purely because of the opposition. And the Bucks looked, I mean, they had a few moments, but generally looked pretty poor, I thought, despite putting up some numbers. Baker Mayfield's now lost 4 on the spin, and just that sort of zoom in by the cameraman, that sick cameraman zooming in on a sort of depressed Baker Mayfield at the end of the game was it was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. But ultimately, for me, the Titans are, I'd say, kind of like a bit of a median team in the NFL. You don't know, they could beat somebody one week, lose the next. They've got a slightly above average defense, slightly below average offense. But as Judah alluded to, it seems like Will Levis could be an upgrade there in certain ways. So for me, I just think this is a pretty average team against a team that are not very good and frankly have just had their heart absolutely ripped out. So for me, I just think this is the one I take. So I'll go Titans -2.5 and just get a couple of extra points there.
Okay, yeah, and I saved this to last. Judah is going to tell us in the next minute why Drew is completely incorrect with his any other bet, so much so that he's going to back as much against him as possible with the money line shot here.
Yeah, we should have put Seahawks Commanders in the rundown to really get some spirited debate going.
Since I have only a minute, I will just say I think the Commanders have changed their offense. Early in the season, they were only pass protecting with 5 guys effectively on all plays. They've kind of changed that to 6 to 7 as the weeks have gone on, which I think does 2 things well for them. Number one, it protects Sam Howell better. He's taking fewer sacks, which I expect to continue by virtue of the fact that they've changed this offense. And I think it also distributes targets to some of the better Commanders receivers in Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, who have seen an uptick in share as they've kind of changed their pass protection. I would also say this is kind of exactly the spot I want to be buying Sam Howell against the Seahawks defense, where if you game against the Giants, where they were starting, for the 4 of us, on the offensive line, well below replacement level. This is a team that's at the bottom of the league in most pressure statistics. So combine those angles, I think Sam Howell will have plenty of time to throw and kind of tear apart the Seahawks secondary, which has certainly been better, but I don't think we'll be able to kind of sustain the play against the Commanders receivers. Sure, the Seahawks, I think, are a solid team. I was obviously backing them last week. I stand by that. But I think that it would not be surprising to kind of see a shootout here in this spot. And I'm willing to back Sam Howell as the market continues to, I say, underprice the Commanders' offense, not accounting for this kind of change in pass protection, which I think is so integral to their success.
Okay, yeah, Sam Howell did make some plays last week. So that's Commanders -2.5, 395 on the matchbook at the Seahawks. Week 10 best bets, best records going down on screen. Drew 5-4, Sam 3-5, and a push, and Judah 4-5. But Judah is in profit because he plays at these wild 2.2, 2.3 prices. Obviously, Judah. So we'll hand it over to you. I think you nearly gave the game away with how confident you were with this case. So very briefly make it again. It's the Saints -2.5.
Yeah, Saints -2.5. I think 2 goals. The Vikings, the roster completely depleted up and down. I would say the Saints are a massive step up in class from the Falcons, and they needed everything to go right against the Falcons. I see the Saints as a far, far better team right now. And also just the main matchup angle is Derek Carr is such a kind of situation-dependent quarterback. And if you're going to generate pressure on him, he's not going to be particularly good. If you keep his pockets clean, especially when his receivers are healthy, he's going to find guys and have offensive success. The Vikings, despite blitzing 60% of the time, are bottom 5 in pressure rate. I see Carr as having plenty of time to throw, and that is exactly the spot where you want to be backing Derek Carr.
Okay, let's go Saints. Drew, over to you for best bets. It's the Ravens. You would think after a win like that and recent wins that the market would have caught up with Ravens, but you still think there's juice in this matchup at the Browns or against the Browns.
Yeah, this is it. Last week on the Ravens train, and then we let it go wherever it goes from here. Yeah. Taking on the Browns more than I'm backing the Ravens at this price. Couple things wrong with the Browns. Number one, their defense is not traveling as well for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it's opponents that they've faced at home versus who they've played on the road, but for whatever reason, there's a pretty aggressive home road split for this Browns defense. And in general, I think the potential for their absolutely disruptive defensive line being a factor is negated by the health of the Ravens offensive line in this one. And so that kind of leaves the Browns in a position where you're not necessarily keeping the Ravens under 20 points, and you're going to have to go score and answer with these guys. And I'll be honest with you, the quality of play we saw from Deshaun Watson last week is not good enough. He made a couple of deep passes. I'll give him credit for that. But boy, oh boy, was there a lot of classic worst of Deshaun on tape in that game against the Arizona Cardinals. He was holding on to the ball for an absolute eternity, particularly early in that game. He was doing a lot of kind of dump offs and, kind of indecision about where he wanted to attack on the field, and just a little bit of scrambling, not anything that was especially game breaking here. So against a Ravens defense that is schemed among the best in the NFL in the last 5 years that I could tell you, I think the Browns offense is in deep trouble. You add to the mix that their running backs have been, at least Ford, who's sort of their key in the absence of Chubb, has been wildly inefficient. And the fact that they've lost their second tackle now, I think the Ravens defense is going to be licking their chops here to really bring out the worst in Deshaun Watson and get a pretty comfortable win here. So I laid it with the Ravens, and if they do what I think is possible, which is just a clean, beating here of the Browns at home, everybody will be falling all over themselves to tell you this is the best team in NFL, number one power rank, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's probably going to be a pretty sweet spot to look for some Bengals on Thursday Night Football next week. That's my hope, at least.
Okay, so keep an eye on the Ravens over the next couple of weeks. Get on them now and see where we are heading next week. And then Sam, finally, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers keeps doing it. We are playing against the Packers this week, and you're laying the points, Steelers.
Yeah, again, I feel so dirty doing this. Steelers at 5-3 is, when you consider the Cowboys and the 49ers are sitting on the same record, one of them is not like the others. Let's put it that way. But ultimately, this is lesser sort of vote of confidence in the Steelers and more kind of, I'm not really convinced on the Packers at all. I was really, really kind of hopeful for Jordan Love before the season. Through the first fortnight of the season, really good. And since then, it has just gone downhill. He barely looks like a starting caliber quarterback in this league. He admittedly did have his first game with a passer rating over 100 this past weekend, but that was against a Rams team that were again in very, very poor health. So coming into this, you have a Steelers team who are higher ranked in defensive DVOA, 7th to 18th. Although I think that 7th seems a bit wild to me. And ranked higher in offensive. 7th to 22nd in defensive DVOA, and in offensive DVOA, 18th to 21st. So they're better in every aspect of the field in that regard. But they've had the extra rest. The Packers are not very good. This is surely, in front of their home crowd, an easy win here, isn't it? So yeah, Steelers -3. I don't feel good about it because I don't think they're anywhere near as good as the records, but I just think the Packers are considerably worse.
Okay, the 5-3 Steelers. We're laying the points -3.0 out of 1.9 on Matchbook. And my thanks to Judah, Drew, and Sam. A fun hour as always chatting NFL with the guys. We will be back next week, please God. Do check out insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the guys' bets. And if you are having a bet on the Matchbook exchange over the weekend, the best of luck, and please gamble responsibly. We'll chat to you next week. All going well. Bye-bye.